Welcome to Evolving with Every Step, your safe space for unearthing life's lessons. We're your sisters, Ashley and Brittany, and together we will explore the depths of life's experiences.
We will discuss the growth and expansion that comes when we get curious around what these experiences can teach us. So take a seat, join the conversation, and let's evolve with every step we take. We are so happy you're here. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Evolving with Every Step. We're so happy you guys are here today. I hope you found the last episode to be a lot of fun. It was such a fun one to record, and we thought today we would dive into a topic that we touch upon in most of our episodes, and that is mental health. But before we do, just want to do our disclaimer here. Just a reminder, we are not mental health care professionals. We're not doctors. This podcast is in no way to supplement or be a replacement for any kind of therapy or medical intervention you may need. We are students of life alongside you guys, and we really just want to be here and share our experiences as we learn and grow through it in hopes that it might give you some inspiration to get curious and learn from your experiences as well. So, Britt, do you want to talk a bit about the topic we're going to be talking about today?
Yes, so today we are going to be talking about mental health and the many facets around mental health, our experiences around it, some of the triggers that we've had where it's come up, as well as our own self discoveries, especially on how mental health is not an end game. It's not like a finish line. You're on a constant journey with mental health. If you have any experience with anxiety, depression, OCD, any sort of mental health disorder, uh, you will know that although you may have some tools under your belt, you're still constantly battling these things, but you may have new ways of coping with it. So we've highlighted our experiences with mental health over the past episodes, how they've come up, some of the origin stories around it, but there's a lot of things we haven't shared around it as well because we didn't want that to be the primary focus of the episode. So today we really wanted to dive into it and bring some more awareness on the resources available to you, as well as have you look inwards on yourself on what you're doing in your daily life, perhaps habits that may be contributing to that too. So, Ash, do you want to start with some of your experiences? And then we'll dive into some of mine and then how we got help in our coping mechanisms.
Yeah. I think the thing that was a bit crazy with my experience, and I don't want to say crazy, I want to say was unfortunate was I was dealing with mental health issues without help for a very long time. And I didn't even know I had some of these issues. So I know when we talked about our story, I did open up about how I started to show signs of OCD and I was experiencing that probably from around the age of 10. And I mean, I had an idea of what it was only because I happened to read a magazine one day. I was like 13. I was reading a magazine and they were talking about it. I remember thinking, this sounds like me. And unfortunately, in that time, like mental health still wasn't something that people were comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know how to bring it up or how to talk about it. And so what I ended up doing was kind of just like researching on my own to better understand it. But what's crazy through that is I didn't understand it was an anxiety disorder. And I didn't understand that I was experiencing so much anxiety even in high school. I didn't know that's what it was. I
Hmm.
didn't because I didn't you know what it was? I wasn't experiencing things like panic attacks. Like, I'd get stressed, but it would come out in ways that I think most parents would think is just being a hormonal teenager where you get really worked up and angry and you've got attitude and you have your
Hmm.
freakouts and things like that, and so I don't think anyone even saw it as like, "Oh, she must have anxiety. Let's look into it." So, it wasn't until I was even in university before I even got proper help for my anxiety, and even then it was like a session.
Yeah.
Um, and that was tough, and so when I realized so here's and it's so it's interesting as I've been working throughout my life and looking back on my experiences, I didn't know I had a real issue with anxiety until I had my first panic attack, and that was in university. I think life was just starting. I think you have a certain threshold in your life, and I think with a lot of the things we went through, we had a high tolerance for stress, but everyone has their breaking point. And so by the time I was in 3rd year university, things were getting really even worse at home. And even though I wasn't living at home, I
Yeah.
was very aware of it, not just in the abuse stance, but even in like dad's health. There was a lot of scares that happened where like, is this it? Is he gonna die? Like it was awful. Like we were so stressed.
Yeah.
And then that's when school really got real. At that time, I was thinking about going to law school. And so my grades really counted. I had to start doing LSAT prep and thinking about how I could volunteer and do all this other stuff. And I think it was just too much, and I remember going in to write an exam, and these were things that never bugged me. That's what's wild, is I never got stressed about an exam. I just went in, I did it, I studied, I did my thing. I remember sitting in the hallway waiting to go in to write this exam, and all of a sudden, I felt dizzy, like, I thought I was gonna faint. I couldn't breathe. I started sweating, and I was like, "What is this?" And I remember running outside and calling mom and being like, "I don't know what this is." And it was a
Mm.
panic attack. And
Oh.
since then, I was getting them more and more frequently. Um, and that's when I realized that I had an issue with anxiety. But I think something that a lot of people don't know is they don't know that they're actually dealing with it, you know?
Mhm. How scary, like, to I've had panic attacks myself, but I knew what they were when they came on because of your experiences, but if you had not known what a panic attack was, and I've heard people in the past experience it, you feel like you're about to die. Like, you
Yeah.
feel like you're having a heart attack or something, and often people end up going to the hospital thinking they're having a heart attack, but it's actually a panic attack. And they're like, "Oh, it's just a panic attack, you'll be fine." But
Mm.
it's not just a panic attack. Like, you feel like you're about to die, and it's a very serious experience to have. And then being plagued with not knowing when they're going to come on, then you're just living with that constant anxiety.
It's a vicious cycle when you start having them because you will have panic attacks about having a panic attack. Like, there's because they would come on and I would be fine and they would just come on out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And it becomes debilitating. Like, I didn't wanna leave the house. Like, I did, like, I had to go do things, but
Mhm.
just things as simple it got to a point where I was this person that I loved to drive. I loved going out all the time and being with my friends, and I loved going to class, and I wasn't a homebody. I just loved being
Yeah.
out and experiencing life, and then I turned into this person that didn't wanna leave the house. Like,
Yeah.
was nervous to go anywhere by myself, and when I was with people, like, because we were together so often in university, like, I would be having anxiety while we were out.
Mhm.
It's it's such a sad moment when you feel like you're living your life to the fullest, so then your world gets so small because you're living in so much fear,
Mhm.
and it got so bad that I started looking at options of could I graduate early so I didn't have to go back because going and sitting in lectures and going and writing exams were, like, just so difficult. I'd be having panic attacks while writing my exams, like, it was just awful.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, like, being on the other side of it, watching you with these issues, also the codependency you had on not wanting to leave the house by yourself. Like, to go to a store, you would want myself to go, like, especially me, because we were living together, like, you would want me to go with you. And
Mhm,
even if we were doing something big, like a mall trip, especially, was a really big deal because if you had anxiety or if you felt a panic attack coming up while we were out shopping, that would cut the trip. Like, we'd have to go home.
mhm.
So I did witness how that very much took control over your day to day and did shrink your world a lot. And it was sad for me to see as well, because I do remember you as a teenager being that person that wanted to go out. You were out with your friends all the time, and you were always the one driving your friends around too if you had a car available to you. So it was sad to see that on the other
Mhm.
side too. So mental health, like, from experiencing it yourself, is really challenging, but it's also challenging being a person in the life of somebody that is experiencing mental health challenges too, because you're not sure how to be there for them. And it can affect
Yeah.
you as well, like how you were very codependent. We were codependent on each other, I would say, because we both had our experiences. But it can kind of shrink your world too if that person's dependent on you to help be their comforter or their security blanket while they're going through this stuff.
For sure. And so the thing to just highlight here is I got to it was my I was at my threshold,
Mhm.
and everyone's threshold looks different. And so, I mean, I hear of kids having panic attacks right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's
really
scary.
it's really sad. And I hit my threshold and I didn't know how to fix it. As we talked about at that
Mhm.
time, like, we came from an abusive environment and we were in ourselves dealing with a lot of we weren't even in our healing process yet. We were just out of this situation while at school. And it was just too much. And that's the thing, like the codependency, and this is
Mhm.
whether you're someone who is deals with anxiety and panic attacks or you're someone who is with them, it's really tough. Like, I feel so bad because there's so much I leaned on you for things. And you shouldn't have had to have I almost felt like you were like you had to be a parent to me in some ways because I felt like I couldn't do things on my own because I was so scared. But I decided I came to a point though in my life, and I think the big thing was actually mom started talking to me about God. And
Mhm.
I always believed in God and all that. I was always very lukewarm about it. And then I finally dived back into my faith, and I have to say, like, because at that time, I didn't have really the resources available to me to go to therapy, so I often turned to Christian podcasts and,
Mhm.
reading the Word and things like that to kinda help me and get me through it, and honestly, it made such a difference, and it was so helpful to me. And it's really wild because as things come full circle, we talked about how, I I definitely struggled a lot after because when we left and things got bad with dad and then we were losing people and having to leave that situation with dad, I got really distracted
Yeah.
from my faith. And it's interesting when I look at the timeline of everything that as I got away from my faith, my mental health started really spiraling downwards over the next 10 years to come. So just to sum up kind of what kind of things I've experienced in my life when it comes to mental health, the OCD started when I was young, so I was around 10. I didn't realize that that's what it was till I was about 13. I didn't talk to anybody about it or get help for it until I was in my mid-20s. I took psychology at university and I learned all about it, and I was like, "All right, that's what it is." And I kind of, like, diagnosed myself and started doing my own kind of exposure therapy and, like, other kinda stuff. And then as I was in university, that's when my anxiety got hyped up. My panic attacks started. And there are things that I still get panic attacks. I'll be honest with everyone. Like, and especially where I get them the most tends to be when I'm driving. And I know we talked about this before where it kind of can become a bit of a superpower in a sense is these things that I've taken the time to work through and understand, when they start acting up now, I know it's because I'm hitting a threshold. I've taken too much on. There's maybe a lot going on. How can I take a step back and reevaluate to adjust it? And this is what I'm hoping we can kind of help people get to when they're looking at the things they deal with is these things are indications that something is not right. And so that's what I've learned to do eventually with what I'm dealing with. But
Mm.
Britt, how about you? What's your experience been up to this point?
Yeah, so it's been a whirlwind for me as well. As we just started talking about this, I forgot that I experienced this as a kid. I did have anxiety as a child where I felt overwhelming guilt about every little thing that I did wrong to the point where I would get insomnia about it. Like, I would have a hard
Mhm.
time falling asleep at night. I would and I think it was also like we said, our mom was very big on her faith, and she was reading us chapters of the Bible during times where dad was, like, really sick. And being a little kid, I started taking on so much guilt, reading like, learning different lessons of the Bible and wanting to be, like, a really good kid. And it got to a point where I had to, like, write notes of, like, all the things that I thought I did wrong and, like, tell mom about everything. And I just remember getting a lot of insomnia as a child, and insomnia has been something that has, like, I wouldn't say plagued me, but it has been a common thing in my life where sleep does not come easily to me if something is burdensome on my mind. So I experienced that, and I would also say that I am a person that tends towards depression. Like, I definitely have depression. Um, and I've always been on like a lower vibration, I would say, where I am a more calm person, but I'm more prone to depression than the anxiety side of things. Of course, when things started to get bad with dad, my depression got really bad as well. I had a really hard time making friends in high school. So by the time I was in grade 9, my best friend went to a different high school than me. And I had a really hard time finding a crowd that I fit in with. In that, what came with that was also the maturity that I had because of the experiences we had at home. So I had a hard time relating with the kids in my grade in grade 9, made me very depressed because I couldn't find a crowd that I fit in with. Um, Moved high schools and cities by the time I was halfway through grade 11, and that kind of turned things around. Uh, but yeah, depression was something that did constantly follow me. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I would often just like stay alone in my room, especially when you went away to university. So it was just me and mom and dad left at home. I just stayed alone in my room and didn't leave the house very much or talk to many people. And then anxiety did start to creep in when we went to university. What's so funny is I remember mom calling the residence that I lived in the devil's armpit. Because, I won't disclose the residence that I stayed in or the university we went to or anything, but it was known to be a party residency, and it
Mhm.
really was. Like, they still tried their best to improve the reputation of the residency by putting kids in, like, science and tech programs and really intense programs, thinking that they would be studying more, but it really didn't help. And I was similar to you where, because of mom's really strong belief in God, that I used like Christian podcasts and the Bible and everything to try to help me with my mental health concerns. And I really didn't know these were concerns. I didn't know that I really had depression or that I had anxiety or anything until very later on in my 20s. Uh, but I used that for a while. And then when I got into university, life got crazy, and it really was the devil's armpit in the sense that it distracted me from my faith. I kinda, like, veered away from it, and that's where it started getting worse along
Mhm.
with how things were at home. So it was just, like, this linear thing of, um, the distractions increasing as well as my mental health declining. So I would have really bad anxiety going into exams, often, like, would not be able to sleep the night before. Again, depression and fear of like social anxiety situations as well, fear of rejection. Um, and the anxiety got worse once we graduated university, where I would also have panic attacks, anxiety attacks. We were traveling to and from Toronto from Oakville. And if I got stuck on a train, I would start getting an anxiety attack. I was obsessive in that I needed to be early for everything, and I would legitimately have a panic or anxiety attack if I started showing up late.
Mhm.
And, the depression was still just always there. I was always just very low, tended on the negative side, would wanna seclude myself and hibernate and not really wanna socialize with new people, bit more of a homebody. And it wasn't until I started seeking help when we were living in Toronto because I tried a therapist while we were living together in Oakville, but it wasn't until we lived together in Toronto and I sought out cognitive behavioral therapy where I really became aware of my narratives and where those stem from and how that impacted my mental health in thinking this situation may have been true in the past. This definition may have been true in the past, but it isn't true anymore. And
Mhm.
reframing my thought patterns and
Mhm.
going to cognitive behavioral therapy really helped me see how my inner monologue really impacts my mental health too. How I think about myself, what I say to myself, what my triggers are, like why am I reacting in this situation? Where did that stem from? And that helped me really evaluate, okay, that may have happened in the past, but it's not going to happen again in the future.
Mhm.
So, and I remember also growing up, sorry, veering back a little bit, mom always being concerned about my mental health because I always secluded myself.
Mhm.
And she would push counselors on me, like school counselors on me. She even pushed me to go to a therapist when we were living together in the townhouse. And I just have to say to listeners, you can't force somebody into help if they're not ready to
Mhm.
accept it. Because all those times that it was forced onto me, I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to talk about it. When I was ready to, that's when I was really able to receive what the physician was saying to me.
And just so for our so people for people listening that maybe didn't listen to our story or haven't heard our previous episodes, a lot of this stems from our upbringing. I'm just gonna sum it
Mhm,
up real quick here. We had a father that was very sick. He's had 2 liver transplants. He had a second one when we were very young children, and that's a lot of when my OCD started. Brittany had her own mental health issues start just from the lack of control that we had as children. As we
mhm,
got older, a lot of unfortunate things happened in our father's life. He turned to drinking and painkillers as his vice, and that made him emotionally, verbally, mentally abusive. And so when you're a child growing up in an unstable home and you're being spoken very awful things over you, like your brain's developing, right? So you are
mhm,
having uh these pathways formed in your brain. And so when you grow up as an adult, you're carrying that forward. So when you're carrying into your adult years that you're no good, you won't accomplish anything, that you're just a problem, like how can you walk into university, walk into life is tough. There's going to be
mhm.
challenges that come your way. How are you supposed to go into those things thinking that you've got it and that you can accomplish anything, that you're strong when you've been told your whole life you're not. And so we got to the point where we realized we needed to get help. Like Brittany said, though, you got to be ready for it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's tough. And I think what happens is I think we know where it's going to go and we're
Mhm.
just not ready to get there yet. But
Absolutely.
what I wanna tell people, because people have maybe never gone into therapy, and I know sometimes this isn't available to everybody, and I know there are support groups out there, you could look them up in your community. If you are a faith-based person, I know there's great, communities you can join in being a part of whichever faith you're in. The thing that I want people to know about, if you have access to therapy and it's something that you're not sure you wanna do or not, a therapist is never gonna push you where you're not ready to go. So if
Right.
you show up and all you can do is say your name and what you did that day, they will listen.
Mm,
Yes, there's money. Hopefully there's insurance that can help cover it, but I don't want people to avoid going because they're worried they're not going to be ready to talk about things. It is at your own pace.
yeah.
And that was huge for us, and I'll tell you why it was helpful to us. We were raised to literally not listen to or believe, and we were taught to tell ourselves we were overreacting if we were
Mhm,
not happy with how something was. In that, like, if someone mistreated us, like, so for example, if our father was yelling at us and saying these awful things, we were taught that we were deserving of it, that we were brats, and that if we had an issue with it, we should feel bad because really we should feel bad for him. So we
mhm.
were taught to never trust our intuition, never trust our gut. We had to flip that completely around, and it's tough because you really when you've gone through something like that, you are not your own advocate at that point. You
No.
don't know how to advocate for yourself. You're actually you are against yourself in everything you do. And then how are you supposed to be successful in life when you're against everything? You should be your advocate. And so when we went to therapy and here's the other part, okay? Friends and family that were supportive, they would tell us, "That's not right," whatever, all this stuff, but, they've got an emotional investment in you, right? They love
It's
you. It's
non-biased. It's
bias.
like
It's
yeah.
biased with friends. So
Yeah.
when you go into therapy, and this is someone they don't love you. You're a
Mhm,
patient, you're a job, they're listening,
mm.
um, and they're listening to you, and when you have someone who has no emotional tie to you or to anyone else in your situation, and you can talk to them about it, and they go, "That was not right." Then all
Mhm.
of a sudden, you go, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah." And for the first time in my life, I felt validation that I was mistreated and
Yeah.
that what I went through wasn't okay, and that how I was spoken to and what was spoken over me in my life was wrong.
Yeah.
And it's mind-blowing, and let me tell you the weight that lifts off of you when you realize that it's and here's the thing we all have problems to work on. We will get to that today. We'll talk about things we have to work on still.
Yeah.
Um, but it's validation and it's relief. And sometimes it's hard
It is.
because you're gonna go through different, emotions after, like, I knew that every time there was a revelation around my past, what would follow would be feelings of kind of, like, anger and sadness. Because now you've gotta process that. You were taught to process that situation by putting it on yourself and telling you were no good, but now to flip it around, you have to accept that you were lied to, and then you have to
Mhm.
accept you were mistreated, and then you have to accept that you need to heal.
Mhm. Absolutely. To go back on, like, not being your own advocate, I was so against myself actually growing up that I even forgot to mention I had body dysmorphia. Still have challenges with it, but because of the insults that were spoken over mom even, like, the
Mm,
men in the family just also the generation that we grew up in with, media at the time, but our family would make comments on anybody's weight that really impacted me growing up, where I found my self-worth was part of my body image, where I even got to a point I didn't have an eating disorder, but I was told I had disordered eating habits where I would starve myself at certain points. And when somebody can validate that for you. Like, when I was ready to open up to my therapist about that and validate that, like, this is what you're experiencing and what was spoken around you as a preteen, when you're already
mm.
very insecure about your body and everything else is not right, it really opens your eyes. You feel like the glass shatters on everything from your past on what wasn't right and what should have been spoken over you. And again, we still approach our past with compassion now because also when you go through these experiences of seeing a professional, you grow compassion towards those people that didn't get help
Mhm.
because that past generation, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing to go talk to a therapist. It was very frowned upon, very
It's
hush hush.
true. And that's actually something I'm glad you said that because I definitely got angry with people and even at mom.
Mhm.
Like I remember going through things and being like, "You know what? You didn't protect me from this or you didn't do this right or this or whatever." And I think when we go into therapy and we're digging into how things were going at, as our through our childhood, we will start to feel a bit feelings of resentment. And we talked about this in our story where I said I had a bit of a resentment towards you and mom because I felt like I always was the one that stood up to dad.
Mhm.
But then when you're going through therapy, it does help you uh, not only heal yourself, but gain compassion in areas that you need to gain compassion in. But the other thing I want to keep in mind here is as you go on this journey, not everyone in your family is going on it.
No.
So as you are maturing emotionally, you need to be cognizant of the fact that everyone else isn't at that level and they're not going to always be able to meet you there either. And
Mhm.
you might be, and as tough as that is, what I want people to remember is when you take that time, you are breaking generational traumas and chains that have been on families. Like, we're coming from a family where mental health issues have been an issue for
Yes.
every
Big
generation.
time.
Addiction has been an issue. There
Mhm.
is people hurting
Depression.
themselves that is a, um, a pattern on one part of our family. And when you are going in and you're getting help and you're trying to heal yourself, what happens then is, like, you're going to have children. Or
Mhm.
maybe you don't become a parent, but maybe you have nieces and nephews. You are then gonna become the person that you needed, and you can
Mhm.
be this for the next generation. And so, when it's really tough and you feel like, "Why am I bothering? No one else around me is changing." Break that bondage, break that chain in your family, and then you're going to help generations to come to live much more successful life. Just think about what your life could and I don't wanna make this in a negative way, but think of what you can give to a child when you have worked through all your stuff and you're emotionally equipped, and then you can help a child understand their emotions and work through
Mhm.
it. I think as a parent, we're all gonna mess up. at some way or another. I'm not a
Of
parent yet,
course.
but
No.
I just already am accepting that I'm probably gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
Uh, but man, what a difference it would have made if we had a father who understood his emotions and didn't go into drinking and
Yeah.
painkillers, you know? So it is really hard work, but just wanna say it's not just for you. It's for generations to come that you're doing
Mm.
this.
Not just generations to come, but the people you live with as well. Because, like we said earlier,
Mhm,
maybe you're not necessarily experiencing this. Maybe you live with somebody or you're dating somebody, married to somebody that is experiencing mental health challenges, and it impacts everybody around you too. I know that with my depression when we were living together, my moods would impact you because I would be super down and you may have had a really great day and you come home and you just see me low crying on the couch, whatever it might be, and you were very empathetic and you would take on that hurt. And I know Ollie's experienced that with me too, because like we said, it's a constant journey that you're on. You're never going to be clear of it. And I have some really low days where he's been impacted by my bad mood. Or I would just be honest with him and say, look, this is just a low day. I'll know I'll get through it. Maybe I just distance myself to not impact you, but it helps both yourself and those that you surround yourself with because they are impacted by your mental health as
mhm.
well.
It's so true. And so another thing so here's the thing, because I know mental health is such a big topic, and
Mhm.
there's no way in this conversation that we're gonna be able to touch upon every single possible situation somebody's in. We can only speak to what we experienced.
Yeah.
But so here there's so many different things that impact mental health, right? Like I hear so many people talking about I have anxiety, I have depression, and there were at times where I experienced depression too. Am I depressed? No. Do I say I have depression? No, but I had it because of circumstances. And that's something I want people to think about when you're
Mhm.
dealing with something. Sometimes it's not that you are clinically this or clinically that. Sometimes it's the situations you're in that are weighing you down. So, for example, our upbringing, like that put us in a lot of anxiety. Do we have stuff that sticks with us still? We do. I would love one day to be completely free from all of it, but we're not there yet.
Mhm.
There's a lot of rewiring we're still doing to make ourselves better, but sometimes it's the situations we're in that bring us there. So, when our father passed away, I had to take time off work. I hit such a depression that she said, "Oh my gosh, you need to take time off. We need to get you help. We need to get you better." There's going to be so many different things. What I'm trying to say with this is when you are experiencing anxiety and you're experiencing depression, it is not going to last forever in all cases. I know there are some people that are clinically depressed, clinically have anxiety, and there's very different extreme cases. But in our case, what I wish I could have better understood was that it wasn't going to last forever.
Yeah. And once you have the right tools under your belt, you have better ways to cope with it and understand that. I mean, I remember too, similarly, when our father passed away, it got to the point where I had to be medicated just temporarily, just to temporarily get my brain into a
Mhm.
new norm. And that's how our doctor phrased it is that like I don't disapprove of people taking medications because I have myself. And it was just that my brain was so used to being at such a low pace that going on the medications for just a couple months was to condition it to a new level of serotonin to get it back to
Mhm.
a new norm where I do say it did help me. It did help me. I experience anxiety attacks far less. I get depression episodes far less than I did before. And I do have to say, I think that did help bring me back, along with it helps you be more receptive to what your therapist has to say because you're not at such a detrimental, hopeless state. Because that's where I was at the time, is I was feeling hopeless, like nothing was gonna help me get better, and that medication helped me level out where I was more receptive to what I was hearing.
100%. I was in the same boat when dad passed and I had my like mental breakdown. The doctor said the same thing. She was like, "Take some take some medication for like 6 months." I think I took it for just a year. And
Mhm.
it's to help give your brain like this boost so that you can do the things like therapy, getting yourself like exercise. It just helps give you a boost so you can do the things.
Mhm.
Thought it was interesting the way she said it. She's like, this is temporary just to give you the boost so you can do the things that are actually going to help you and your mental health, which
Mhm.
was therapy, uh, working out, eating healthy, making
Socializing
sure
again.
making sure that you've got a good community around you. Like these are all the things that are important to your mental health. We wanted to be forthcoming about the fact that we have been on medication and that sometimes there is a lot of shame around that and there is nothing wrong with it. And I think what I
Mhm.
really loved about our experience with it is and the way our doctor approached it was she's like, look, she wasn't putting us on it to be like, here, now you can have medication for the rest of your life. If people need to, like, I get it. Sometimes there's like, we hear about it, like, there might be a chemical imbalance and you actually need medication to help your brain. There is nothing wrong with that. If
Mhm.
you are sick, someone breaks their leg, we're not going to say, just will your leg to mend back together. You know what I'm saying? Like, your mental health,
Yeah.
if your brain
Cheer
needs
up.
something, yeah.
Yeah.
If your brain needs it so that you can function as a proper adult and be independent and be happy and healthy, you got to do it.
Also, if you don't have a therapist and you need something to help you while you're looking for somebody,
Yeah.
game changer too.
Yeah. And so and again, at the same time, we're also not telling you to go on medication. I wanna be very clear here because
It was a last resort for
this
us.
is a very sensitive topic, and we're not saying do it or don't. We just what we're trying to get clear here is that if you are talking to your doctor and you're talking with therapists and they're able to recommend things that they think are going to help you, I don't want you to steer away from it because of a stigma. That's what I'm trying to
Mm.
get at. If you genuinely feel in your heart and your gut that that is not the right move for you, you listen to whatever gives you peace, but please do not veer away from something because you're worried about what other people might think or that
Mm.
I've heard this is the thing is I've heard about people even in the medical industry, okay? Someone who like nurses that literally are in they see patients all the time saying they don't wanna get help because they're not crazy. I'm like, "Am I crazy?
Mm.
You
Mm.
you don't wanna get therapy
Yeah.
because you think that means you're crazy? Like, who made you think that getting help was not a good what meant that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, this is me just going on a rant to say that if you are in a situation where you think, "I think I do need to I need to follow my doctor's recommendation and take medication for a bit to help me get better," I'm gonna
Mhm.
tell you, I was there. I felt so hesitant. I didn't wanna be the
Yeah.
person that had to be on medication to make my mental health better because I even thought that meant I wasn't strong, and that's not the case, is sometimes we need help, and that's what I
Yeah.
want to
Nothing
not
wrong
be a
with it.
there's nothing wrong with getting help. And when
Mhm.
you go and get the help and you really because this is something we both did, we got to that point, we just hit an all-time low when dad died, especially after all the abuse we went through and all the trauma, like, that was the absolute threshold that we hit in our life where our brains were like, I can't do this." And our
Checking
doctor
out.
said yeah, it was. Total checkout, and our doctor was like, "Alright, take this. We're going to get you help. We're going to focus on making sure that you're doing all the things you need to be healthy, which we're going to talk about that later. How are we spending our time to promote our mental health?"
Mhm.
Um, we did all that to then get better and get stronger. And let me tell you, it was such an eye-opening experience to be brought down to my absolute needs and have to say, I need help
Yeah.
and I need things to help me get better. It humbled me in such a way because I think sometimes we all can struggle with pride a little bit, thinking, I'm strong, I can do that, I'm independent, all this stuff. And it helped me also have a lot more compassion for other people who do need to go on medication.
Mhm.
It's because to make that decision to say, yeah, I got to take it, it's not something people make lightly because we all hear the stigma all the time that it's not um like you shouldn't have to depend on medication. It's only for crazy people. Like you're weak. Like, it's just so I just want to say to anybody who's struggling with that decision, if you are not going down that route because you're just afraid of what other people think, really, really get quiet with yourself. What is going to be right for you? What help do you need? And don't be afraid to take the help.
So I think that's a really good point, Ash. Why don't we get into talking about like how you're spending your time and how that can affect your mental health too? Because I don't think our generation is really aware of this. And this is something that we are just coming to terms with ourselves. So again, we talk about this not because we're professionals at it. It's just something that we're really becoming convicted of ourselves of how we spend our time is really affecting the quality of our mental health.
Yeah. And this comes from a place of humility and love because we are struggling with these things still. And I will admit right here that I think if I was more diligent with these things, I may have not have hit as rock bottom as we did after dad died. And I say that
Yeah.
because I don't think I've been in my life spending my time the way that actually would properly foster the proper mental health
Yeah.
that I needed. I'm also going to say that I don't think this world is set up in a way to promote mental health. The
I don't
things
think
that,
so. I
yeah,
think it's a facade. Like we hear right off the bat, social media. Like social media is presenting and becoming more open about mental health and promoting it, but social media in itself is what is declining our mental health. And we have talked
mhm,
about this. Like social media comes up in every single episode, I think, and it's because of how much it consumes us
yep,
these days. Like the mindless scrolling, the comparisons that you make. Like when you go on there, you're comparing yourself without even knowing it. You're comparing yourself to the person you're
mhm.
seeing on the other side of the screen, whether it is in a negative way, like one of two negative ways. One, wishing that you had the life that person had, or two, you're judging that other person.
Oh, yeah. And we talked about before, I said it's like the Wild West. You have no control over
Yeah.
what's coming next when you're scrolling, and it like 1 minute you're watching a puppy do the cutest thing and you're happy. The next thing you're seeing a news report on like 30 people that just died somewhere. Like, like there's no control over what comes through. And just I want to be so clear about this. Social media is so fake. Like if
Hmm.
you I mean, I could go on. We'll do it. Oh my gosh, I could go on about this. I get so riled up about it.
We'll do a whole episode on social media just so we
We'll
can
do it.
have the openness to
Yes,
talk about
but
it. But it is a highlight reel. Like you were going to say, it is a highlight reel of what is going on in that person's life. In reality, we've all done it. We know how many takes you've done on that video to get the perfect shot. You know how many photos you've taken to get the perfect selfie. You know, possibly you're yelling at the person on the other side of your phone to get the right angle. It's not real.
well, think about this, okay? We are all on social media just trying to sell a brand of ourselves.
Hmm.
It's a brand, which means
Yeah.
it's not real. So when we were young and you'd watch, because we didn't have social media when we were really little, commercials, billboards, it was all to sell something, to convince you of something. That's
Mm.
what social media is. We're all trying to convince everyone of something. Social media for this podcast, we're trying to convince you to watch it.
Yeah.
Watch our podcast. Like we're all trying to
Yeah.
sell something in
Yeah.
some sense, whether it's to sell an actual service, to sell entertainment, whether it's even just sell an idea about ourselves. That's all we're doing. And when it comes to that, there is not 100% honesty because if someone's trying to sell to you that their life is perfect, let me tell you, it is not.
No.
It's not. They deal with hardships all the time. But what's happening and what makes me so worried for the younger generations that grow up on this is they grow up thinking that life needs to be good every day. And that is not life. Life is hard. You're going to have
Yeah.
trials. And when you have a bad day and you're sad because your day didn't go well, you're not depressed. You're just sad because it didn't go your way. But those things build character. And I don't say that to discount anyone that is dealing with depression or anxiety because we have it, we've dealt with it, we still do. But this is what's happening. We are being sold an idea
Yeah.
that we need to be happy and joyful every second of every day. It's unrealistic. And why would we not get depressed if we're trying to achieve something that's not possible? So there's a
Or if you follow like this 10-step morning routine, every day is going to be perfect.
yeah, does it work for you? I mean, hey, here's what I say. Pick and choose what you think might align with you, but my goodness, just we are so consumed with doom scrolling and it's such a thing we go to. And I think a lot of times this is what I find myself that I struggle with. When my anxiety is going up and I'm getting stressed, I stop putting time into things that actually help me and I start doom
Mhm,
scrolling just to distract
mhm.
myself. Um, so yeah, that's a big part because we spend a lot of our time in social media and it's such an impact to our mental health, especially with the younger generation, I find. I also want to challenge people. How are you spending your time when you're with your family and friends? What do you talk about? Are you
Yeah.
gossiping? Are
Mm,
you talking about other people and judging other people? And I'm not saying this as someone who doesn't do it. I still struggle with this. Okay.
yeah,
So I'm not guilt free. I got convicted about this the other weekend and I was like, oh my gosh, I thought it was better in this
yeah,
area and I'm not. But you can't speak poorly of other people and then be happy. You know what I'm saying? Because
yes.
we're speaking poorly, you're coming from a
Mhm.
place of either pride or insecurity, and
And
neither one of those work for you.
how quickly can a gossip session turn into anger in that setting? Like, you can easily spiral, and it's like it's happened to us talking about people that have upset us, just keep spiraling on these insults and stories and venting, and the venting becomes toxic that it ruins your mood to the point where that didn't help at all. And like, what was the point of it all? It's not like you're talking
Yeah,
to the person that you have an issue with to
you're
resolve the
holding you're
issue.
holding all this animosity towards this
Yeah.
individual, and what's so funny is sometimes you don't even know them. It's just like
Yeah.
someone's like, Did I tell you what so and so did? I've never actually met this person, but now I don't like them and I'm all angry about it." Like, you
Yeah,
know,
then all
what?
of a sudden you form an opinion on somebody that you don't even know, nor like
Mhm.
will you ever cross paths in your life. Like it really it does. I'm also guilty of it. I am not free of it, but it does rub me the wrong way when there is negative or any sort of gossip being spoken to about a person. The person's not there to defend themselves, or we don't even know if what is being said is true.
And here's the
Or
thing. We're not
yeah.
saying like if something happens and you're hurt by someone, we're not saying you can't tell anybody. You can go I know my trusted people. I go, "Look, I
Mm,
experienced this. I am struggling hard with my emotions." If you're using it as a space to talk things out and then you're like, "Okay, thanks. I know how to move forward and resolve it." That's one thing. But if you're
yeah.
just sitting around the table talking about people just for the sake of talking about it, like I'm telling you, it is like you might not think it, but it is rooting seeds of toxic energy in your body, and that is affecting your mental health.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Can we also talk about binge drinking?
Let's get into it.
Oh, that's a
Let's get
cultural
into
thing
it.
too, eh?
Yeah.
Like it's such a society.
Yeah.
Like Friday night, pour yourself a glass of wine. Hey, let me tell you, I
Tough
pour
day.
myself a glass of wine. This is something that I have been feeling very, very convicted about lately, and I've been taking time to step away
Hmm.
from not making that habit. It's like, we know you hear people, they talk about, "I have anxiety, I have depression," and then they spend their weekends. Because here, I was this person, I'd spend my weekend going out and having drinks on a Friday and Saturday night.
Hmm.
Alcohol's depleting my body of vitamins. I'm waking up the next day feeling depressed or anxiety,
Hmm.
hungover, whatever. Like that is not helping. And I'm so sorry. This is going to really tick off some people, but if you want your mental health to improve, you gotta cut back on that a bit. And not saying to never have it, but be a little ask yourself, how often am I doing this? And how do I feel
Also,
the next day?
there's actual like science behind it that people that drink even just like socially on a weekend, like even if you don't drink from Monday to Thursday, let's say, and you have a drink on maybe even just Friday night or Friday, Saturday night,
Mhm.
your body is in a state of stress the whole week up until you have that alcohol because of that withdrawal.
Oh yeah.
The cortisol levels actually increase because of that. It's used to that routine of the alcohol. And like, go look it up because I've seen the science behind it. You're just depleting your mental health even more. And again, I'm not free of it because I'm getting convicted of this as well, where especially with our history of addiction in the family, that I need to
Mm,
be very aware of why I'm drinking and how much I'm drinking to be careful of getting sucked into that addiction.
And sorry, I started laughing because I was just thinking, like, as women, we with the gossiping piece, like, that is such I'm gonna say, like, when you're a woman, like, that is such a girl thing, like, and then I'm just picturing, like, all the times that, like, you sit around with your girlfriends with a glass of wine and you're just talking about other people, like, 2 of the 2 things that are
The two the two things that can
come
ruin your
together.
mental health
Well, and like I said,
combined into one.
we're not free of this, and the reason why we're bringing it up is because 'cause I've been feeling I think because we've done the therapy thing,
Mhm,
we've gone through all these things, and then we've had to ask ourselves, "Why am I still struggling with
mhm,
anxiety? Why do I still struggle with feeling low? Why do I still get panic attacks now and then? Like, what" and this is what we want people to start doing. How can you be a warrior for your own mental health? That means you gotta own a lot of stuff. You gotta
mhm,
get real honest with yourself and ask, "How often am I gossiping and judging other people?" Judging is negative. So when you're
mhm,
thinking in a negative state, that's not good for your mind. How often are you drinking? Are you doing recreational drugs?
mhm.
How are you feeding your body? Because how you take care of your physical body, like gut health is so linked to your mental health. And if you're
Yeah.
eating bad food, if you're drinking, like all these things are going to impact your mental health. And they've all impacted mine. I know that.
Another one, um, do you how often are you helping other people?
Yeah. Big
Are
one.
you when we are so consumed in ourself, when we are constantly thinking about our issues, my this, my that, you gotta step away and put that attention towards somebody else. Help somebody else's day be better, and you'll notice, like, I bet you do one good deed that day,
Hmm.
your mood is gonna improve already on its own.
How
You
often did
gotta get
I
yourself off
not
your
show up?
brain.
How often did I
Yeah.
not show up somewhere because my anxiety?
Yeah.
I'm sad today. I don't
Yeah.
feel because I'm sad. But it's like, have think about times where you've done something nice for someone, even if it's like you're at the coffee shop and you're getting a coffee and you tell the person who gave you whatever, be like, "Oh my gosh, love your haircut." Like
Yeah.
something as simple as that, and they go, "Oh my gosh, thank you."
I
It's like
love your
these little
nails.
things, little acts
Yeah.
of kindness. And when we can, and I think that's something that I've learned a lot about is the more you have yourself on your mind and you're thinking about yourself, what's my next career? When am I going to find this? When you're so consumed with yourself, you are just like, you like almost become a prisoner to
Mhm.
yourself. Like that's the only way I can describe it. You're a
Mhm.
prisoner to your problems. You want to get your mind off your problems, go be of service to somebody else, whether that's family, friends, volunteering somewhere. It's
Mhm.
something I'm just starting to do for myself because I'm gonna tell you, I think I've been very selfish, especially in the last few years. I will say
Oh.
that. I'm gonna admit it. Let me be the first one here. Maybe someone else listening will be like, "You
I
know what?"
have 2. I
Yeah.
have 2. I mean, I'm not trying to create any excuses, but we had some pretty big life events, like, all positive life events in the past couple years, but I've definitely been wanting to branch out more and do more acts of good deed, even if it's, like, buying that food donation bag at the grocery
Mhm.
store. How easy is that? Like,
Yeah.
a $10 food donation bag, just drop it on your way out, complimenting the person that's cashing me out. The other day, this is not me boasting or anything, but it's just an example. The other day, I was getting a smoothie after the gym, and the person was taking forever to make the smoothie. Like, he was longer than a person should take to make a smoothie. It was like a couple ingredients. And the guy hands me the smoothie, and it was warm. And he's like, "I'm sorry I'm new here." And I could have been rolling my eyes. I could have been like, "Can you hurry up, please?" Because I had a very busy day ahead of me. But instead, I smiled at him and I said, "No problem. You're doing great." Like, just something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't know what the other person is going through too. Like,
Mhm.
you could be seeing somebody new at the grocery store taking a really long time to scan things through, whatever. They could be having a hard day. They could be new on the job too. But just a simple smile to somebody and a compliment or just saying you're doing a great job, you have no idea how much that can impact somebody else. And then
Mhm.
you feel better because you didn't contribute to their bad day.
Yeah, and look, again, I'm going to say it because we're gonna get people in the comments saying, "Well, what about people who are clinically depressed and they can't even pull themselves out of bed?" I'm not talking about them, okay?
No.
I'm talking about the real issue that I'm seeing because we're seeing it in our lives, and I
Mm,
see it in other people, is we are so self-centered. And this is the culture we grew up in, right?
mhm.
It's all about what's your career gonna be? How are you gonna do this? How are you gonna do that? And so it's all about our lives. Where are we gonna take our lives? And it's way less about community and way less about how we can
Mm,
help other people. And we get offended so easily and we think, well, how could you be so rude? Do you have any idea what I'm going through? Do you have any idea what they're going through?
yeah.
Like, what if we all just took the perspective of, I have no idea what their story is. I have no idea what they've been through in the day, and so I'm gonna be kind. Even if
Mhm.
someone is rude, like, to not be rude back, like, I can't tell you, like, there's been so many times where, you know, you're in Toronto or wherever, people flip you off or they honk at you and they're rude to you, and you know what? Yeah, maybe they're like that because 'cause they're going through something, right? But
Yeah.
then you think, what does me being rude and insensitive back do for anybody?
If anything, you might catch them off guard by responding back with kindness and make them
Mhm.
rethink their reactions to other people.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that too, like, some people will just show up because 'cause they're ready to fight,
Mhm.
and there's just a lot of hurting people hurt people, and I think if
Yeah.
we all could be just a bit more compassionate to each other, it's just amazing, just the smallest thing makes such a difference. Just the
Yes.
smallest thing, and how many and just think of a time where someone's just been out of nowhere kind to you, and it's just made your day. Like,
Mhm.
it's so easy to make somebody's day.
You can get the chain effect afterwards, like the whole pay it forward thing. Pay it forward doesn't necessarily need to be a monetized thing where you're paying for someone's coffee and it keeps going. It can just be your act of kindness will now influence them to be kind to somebody else. And it's that chain reaction. Similarly, that if you get yelled at that day or something bad happens to you, you go give attitude to somebody else. That person gives attitude to somebody else. Everything we do can have this chain reaction. And where do you want that to go? Do you want to spread love? Do you want to spread hate? Do you want to help make somebody's day a little bit better where it trickles down to other people, where we now have a society of love and kindness, where we have better mental health afterwards for it? Like
Mhm.
this is the world that I would love to live in.
It's
Is
so funny. It's so funny because, like I was talking before about when you go to get therapy, it's like, this is where you can end that in your family line, right? Like,
Mhm.
end that issue. When people are rude to me in public, I like to think about that too. Like, I'm like, I don't know who started the ripple
Yeah.
of all being rude, but it ends with me. It ain't going past
Mhm.
me. Like, I almost
Yeah.
like to look at it like a challenge. Like, people talk about like spiritual warfare. I'm just like, nah,
Mhm.
you want this
Nice try.
ripple to keep going through this day, it stops with me. And I'm actually gonna go be nice to somebody else. And that's me
Mhm.
winning that argument. A little bit of your
Absolutely.
perspective on that stuff.
I know. And like we said, we're not free of any of this. We're just learning these things as we go. And really, I think this year, especially, we are really becoming aware of how we're spending our time and how it's impacting our mental health. Social media is something I'm definitely needing to work on, still working on paying attention to how I'm drinking,
Mhm.
spending time to do kindness to other people, spread love towards other people to get my mind off of myself being another thing,
Mhm.
and making sure I'm feeding more healthy things into my body too. Cause like Ashley said, like that all is a chain reaction. We're a holistic being. Where there's ailment somewhere in your body, it's going to affect the rest of you. So you really do need to be taking care of yourself.
Can I just say that we all know what's the healthy choice? Like, if I was to say to someone right now, sit down with a piece of paper and write down all the things that would make you healthy. And I just really want people to just start asking themselves just simple questions. What am I doing today to improve my mental health, improve my physical health, like my financial health? Like, what are you doing? You know the right things to do. It's just
Mhm,
it's tough because it's
mhm.
not the easy things to do. Um, so we're learning these things.
Mhm.
We just wanted to throw these questions and these ideas out there because I think sometimes it's just tweaks in our life that can make just such a world of a difference to how happy we are overall. And so just wanted to give these things for people to think on.
Yeah. And a friendly reminder, too, that, like we said, mental health is not a straight line. There are times where our experiences, our ailments with mental health come up. And just because of the work that we've done in the past, we just have more tools under our belt to help us cope and move past them. It doesn't mean that we don't experience them. Panic
Mhm.
attacks still come up, depression spells still come up. And often when they come up, it's because we're doing something in our day to day life that is triggering that from coming up, where we have
Mhm.
to hone it in and be self reflective on what is it that I'm doing that is bringing this up again, and what do I need to change in my lifestyle.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got
So,
this, guys. You know what? Just as we'll wrap up this podcast because we could go on forever. And you could probably hear the passion in our voices. It's because we are being convicted of all these things right now too. And um it's hard. There are
yeah.
so many I think especially with we have so much access to information. We're told so many things. As we talk about in every podcast, get quiet with yourselves.
Hmm.
Learn yourself. What do you need? Let's not be afraid to turn off social media. Turn it
Hmm.
all off and get quiet.
You will see the
You
world keeps going without it there.
It does. And let me also tell you, you also keep going on
Hmm.
without it. And you I think we keep turning to so many things to figure out what to do, but I'm telling you, you probably already know the right things.
Hmm.
And it's the thing that is sometimes the thing we don't want to face because it's a bit difficult. But I tell you, if you're willing to be a warrior for your life, a
Yeah.
warrior for your health, we need you. You're here for a reason, and we need you here to fulfill your purpose. And it is there,
Yes.
and you are going to find the thing that works for you. You just gotta fight for your life. We're
Hmm.
not set up for success in what is put on as important by our culture, but
Yeah.
you can do it. I know you can. And
That's great.
yeah, that's all I gotta say. Sorry.
Sash.
That's my pep talk for the day. I'm gonna take it away with me.
Yes, that is great. Really, really awesome discussion today on mental health. Just, I think what has really helped is shedding some light to our listeners on what we're doing in our day to day that can help, that can actually make it worse, and how some tips on how to make it better, just to get more reflective with ourselves. So,
Mhm.
I think we'll end this episode with these questions. What are you doing in your day to day? Do you think you could sit down, write on a piece of paper what you're doing that could be hindering your mental health? What are some of the things that you're struggling with your mental health? And how do you see that your daily habits are feeding into that? And what are some small changes? Maybe if it's just one change at a time, what
Yeah.
are some small changes you can do to help get better? And how can you spread some love and kindness in
And
the
then I also
world?
just and I wanna add, like, sometimes we do make all the right changes and life is still really heavy and you gotta think, like, where can I get help? Talk to your doctor, talk to a therapist. These things are not they should not be a stigma around it.
No,
Your mental health is an investment, as is the rest of your health, and if you need it, you need to go get help, and it doesn't mean you're weak. It means
no.
it takes a lot of strength to admit that you need help, and let me tell you, when you do, you get better, you heal, you get stronger, and then you get to come out on the other side being able to do the things you need to do to keep you healthy. So please, please don't turn away from those options if you have them available to you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to dive into many of life's lessons. I know we kind of were talking about all sorts of stuff today. So thank you for joining us. We hope you found value in this conversation.
And don't forget to join us in our next episode. Well, we will continue to explore and evolve together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe and share with a friend who may benefit from this episode. You can follow us on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Evolving with Every Step for more insights and behind the scenes content.
And remember, until next time, remember to embrace every experience with curiosity, so we can evolve with every step. And we'll see you in our next episode.